They didn't expect precision from you. They didn't expect patience either. They thought you would stumble, that you would panic, that you would show your hand too soon. Instead, you moved in silence, piece by piece, step by step, and when the moment came, everything landed as if rehearsed 1,000 times. That is why they looked at you differently. That is why whispers started. Because you didn't just succeed. You executed with a calmness that felt military, with a sharpness that felt trained. And yet, there was no uniform, no badge, no official title to explain the discipline. It came from you. From nights you built habits in solitude. From mornings where you forced yourself into structure when no one was watching. They saw the results and thought it must be training. What they don't realize is that the training was life itself, and you learned how to use it. Execution isn't about theatrics. It isn't about shouting victories or making noise before the work is finished. True execution is invisible until it is undeniable. That's the part that shook them. They were waiting for your mistakes, ready to point at them, ready to celebrate them. But the mistakes never came. You didn't rush. You didn't crumble. You lined up the pieces and let them fall exactly where you intended. That is why comparisons to special forces come to mind, because soldiers know the value of patience. They know that calm hands beat fast hands. And whether you realize it or not, you tapped into that same rhythm. You became the kind of person who does not chase the spotlight. You became the kind of person who lets results speak. And nothing unnerves people more than someone who doesn't announce power, but simply demonstrates it. What most people don't understand is that smooth execution comes from small, hidden disciplines. It doesn't come from talent. It doesn't come from luck. It comes from the choice to refine, even when no one is applauding. You stopped wasting energy on proving yourself and started stacking actions that couldn't be denied. You trained your nervous system to remain steady. You taught your mind to focus under pressure. That kind of steadiness is rare, and that is why they can't stop watching. Because the truth is most people crack. They overtalk, they overshare, they overspend their energy on appearances. But you became precise. You conserved. You cut away what didn't matter. And when it was time, you unleashed everything cleanly. That is what execution really is. The removal of waste. The elevation of essentials. The refusal to let chaos dictate your timing. Your calm didn't just impress them. It scared them. Because calm under pressure is unnatural for most. The brain wants to run. The body wants to react. The heart wants to panic. Yet you stood steady. You didn't collapse into survival mode. You stayed in control. And when you control your state in the middle of chaos, you gain something dangerous: options. That is what separates the ones who thrive from the ones who drown. Most people lose all perspective in the heat of the moment. You sharpened yours. You widened your awareness instead of narrowing it. That makes you untouchable in situations designed to break people. That's why they whisper comparisons. Because in their world, only the best of the best hold that kind of frame. You weren't trained to be that way. You chose to become it. And choices are more powerful than training. The psychology is simple. People equate smooth execution with external guidance. They think only someone with a strict commander or elite institution could hold such poise. They forget that self-discipline is the highest form of command. You became your own instructor. You became your own drill sergeant. You gave yourself tasks and punished yourself with growth until smoothness became second nature. Others looked for shortcuts. You built foundations. Others sought applause. You built patience. And now when everything comes together, they can't believe it came from someone ordinary. That disbelief is the sweetest proof of all. Because the truth is, nothing about it was ordinary. It was the result of a mind that refused to drift and a heart that refused to break under pressure. Smoothness isn't about lack of effort. It is about the invisible effort that no one saw. It is the thousands of repetitions that looked boring at the time but created mastery when it mattered most. The world celebrates results but forgets the invisible grind that creates them. You embraced that grind. You became loyal to it. And because of that, when the stage finally appeared, you moved with grace that looked almost supernatural. People stared because they couldn't connect the dots. They couldn't reconcile the person they underestimated with the precision they just witnessed. That's why they whispered about special forces. Because their minds needed an explanation. And the simplest one was that you were trained. They couldn't accept that it was simply you. Refined, disciplined, sharpened, unstoppable. Execution leaves no room for noise. And that is what makes people uncomfortable. They cannot figure you out when you don't narrate your every step. They don't know what to do with someone who shows the result before anyone knew the work was happening. That's why they spin stories about you. That's why they invent myths. Because smooth execution breaks their logic. They are used to watching struggle, excuses, and drama. They aren't used to watching someone close the distance with elegance. You didn't just finish the task. You erased the idea of struggle from it. You made it look effortless. And that effortlessness became the part they cannot forgive. People don't fear difficulty. They fear grace. They fear someone who makes the impossible look simple. Here is the part you need to understand deeply. When you move this way, you will always unsettle others. They will doubt you, question you, even attack you. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded too cleanly. Your execution will feel like a threat to those who thrive on excuses. They need you to stumble to confirm their own pace. But when you don't stumble, you reveal their waste. You show them what's possible. And possibility scares the unprepared. They will try to diminish you. They will try to label you. They will try to say it was luck. Do not argue. Do not explain. Let the results live. They cannot be erased. Execution this smooth comes with responsibility. You cannot let yourself drift into arrogance. You cannot let yourself grow soft. Because the very thing that made people question if you were special forces was your discipline. You must continue. You must refine further. You must build even sharper systems. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a standard you now have to uphold. And that standard will either destroy you or elevate you depending on whether you keep honoring it. Remember this? Smoothness is not a moment. It is a lifestyle. They raise their voices because silence exposes them. They pound the table with false confidence, drowning out their own insecurities in volume. You noticed that. You didn't meet their noise with noise. You sat back, you let the storm roar, and you gave them nothing but a steady gaze. That is what burned them. They weren't afraid of your words. They were afraid of your refusal to be pulled into their rhythm. Manipulators know they survive by distraction. If you stay quiet, if you don't rise to their bait, then the mask starts to slip. And when the mask slips, the entire illusion dies. They will accuse you of arrogance, of cruelty, of coldness. Let them. Every insult they throw is just another desperate attempt to break the silence you hold. You don't fight them with arguments. You fight them with absence. Absence is heavier than noise. You learn that people who shout the loudest are often the ones with the least to say. They fill the air with drama, half-truths, and exaggerations because they know silence gives you room to think. And when you think, you see patterns. You see that their words don't line up with their actions. You see that their stories have gaps. Silence makes their tricks visible, and that terrifies them. They need chaos because in chaos, the details blur. But when you stay calm, when you breathe through the moment, their power drains out like water through open hands. You don't need to confront them directly. You simply let them collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Silence becomes your weapon, and every second you refuse to react, their desperation grows louder. They can't survive when someone refuses to give them an audience. They expect you to rise, to shout, to justify yourself. That's how they trap you. Once you defend, you're already inside their web. You tried that once before, explaining yourself, making your case, begging to be understood, and it never worked. They twisted every word. They took your defense and turned it into evidence against you. Then you learned the truth. The strongest reply is none at all. Silence robbed them of their script. They had lines prepared for your resistance, but nothing for your refusal. They don't know what to do when you sit there unshaken. They wanted to drag you into a theater, but you walked out of the performance. And without you, the play lost meaning. They need the stage. You need only the exit. And the exit gives you back your peace. Noise is the cloak they wear when they fear exposure. Watch them carefully. The louder they become, the more they are hiding. It is not passion. It is panic. They hope that if they shout enough, if they throw enough words into the air, the truth will suffocate. But silence keeps the truth alive. Your quiet stare makes them stumble. Your calm refusal makes them sweat. They will try harder, pushing insults, raising accusations, painting pictures of you that don't exist. They do this because they cannot stand your stillness. Stillness is a mirror, and mirrors reveal cracks. When you stop reacting, they see themselves for what they are, fragile, hollow, desperate for control. You didn't have to scream. You didn't have to fight. You simply stood in silence, and their empire shook. You must understand, manipulators are addicted to your energy. They feed on your reactions. They study your breathing, your tone, your body language, because every reaction is a thread they can pull. When you stay quiet, you cut every thread at once. That is why they fear you now. They used to think you were easy prey. They used to believe you would always explain, always defend, always try to prove yourself. Then you stopped. You stopped giving them your words. You stopped feeding them your attention. You let them perform in a room where no one was listening. That is the moment power shifted, because when a manipulator loses their audience, they lose their stage. And without the stage, they're nothing but an actor in an empty theater. They call you dangerous now, not because you attack them, but because you don't. Your silence makes them nervous in ways your anger never could. Anger they can manage. Anger is predictable. Silence terrifies them because it is unpredictable. They don't know what you're thinking, what you're planning, or when you'll move. Silence makes them feel hunted in a game where they thought they were the predator. That is why they lash out even harder. They try to provoke you with gossip, with lies, with petty traps. But the more they push, the deeper your stillness cuts, and each failed attempt only reminds them of the truth. They cannot shake you anymore. The power they once had is gone. You reclaimed it, not with fire, but with quiet ice. You learned to turn silence into a lesson, not just for them, but for yourself. Silence taught you patience. Silence gave you space to see who deserved your time and who only drained it. Silence allowed you to watch without reacting, to learn the patterns, to understand the games. And once you understood, you no longer felt the urge to play. That is what manipulative people can't stand. They don't just fear your silence, they envy it. They wish they could hold themselves that steady. They wish they could stand that tall without needing applause, but they can't. And so they hate you for it. They hate you because you prove that control isn't about domination. It's about not being moved when they try everything to push you. Look around you. The people who used to laugh, who used to mock, who used to gang up, they're quieter now. They pretend they're unbothered, but you see the cracks. They whisper when you leave. They study your moves even as they pretend not to. They can't admit it, but they are nervous. Because the more you embrace silence, the more unpredictable you become. They can't forecast your next step, and that lack of control gnaws at them. That is what silence does. It starves the manipulators, and in starving them, it forces them to reveal themselves. And once revealed, their power dies. You don't need revenge. You don't need proof. You need only to keep still, to keep moving forward, to keep denying them the chaos they crave. They failed because they underestimated you. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought quiet meant you had no answers. But silence was your weapon all along. You weren't empty. You were calculating. You were saving your energy for yourself, not wasting it on them. And when the dust cleared, it wasn't their noise that lingered. It was your calm. That calm outlived every rumor, every attack, every plot. They gave everything they had, you gave them nothing, and still you won. That is why they fear you now, because they realize they can no longer control you, no longer predict you, no longer shape you into what they want. Silence freed you, and freedom terrifies those who live as slaves to manipulation. They thought they were clever because they knew the rules. They memorized the pieces, the openings, the counters, the rehearsed lines that made them feel prepared. But you were never looking at their board. While they obsessed over moves everyone could predict, you were designing a different game entirely. That is why they look confused now. They followed the rules to perfection, but still they lost. The dangerous mind does not argue over pawns. It creates a new battlefield where pawns do not even matter. You never told them what game you were playing, and that silence became your weapon. They moved confidently, thinking they were in control, unaware that their entire confidence was misplaced. They lost without realizing how, and that is what terrifies them. They feel comfortable when everyone is trapped inside the same system. They thrive when people fight over scraps, over titles, over fleeting attention. You saw how shallow that was. You realized that the crowd only fights because they were told those scraps were valuable. So you refused to join the brawl. You stepped outside of it. You played for something bigger, something invisible to those caught in the noise. They laughed at you at first, thinking you were naive. They whispered that you were lost, because they couldn't measure what they couldn't see. Then the results came slowly, steadily, ruthlessly. By the time they noticed, the gap was too wide. They had been playing to be popular. You had been playing to be untouchable. The most dangerous mind creates its own definitions of victory. They were chasing applause. You were building leverage. They were addicted to validation. You were addicted to clarity. They wanted to win in front of others. You wanted to win in silence. And that difference changes everything. Because when the world shifts, when the board flips, when the lights go out, their borrowed confidence collapses. Yours remains steady because it was never borrowed. They call it luck when you succeed. They call it arrogance when you do not beg for their praise. But what they never admit is that you simply chose a higher game. And the higher game is invisible to anyone who refuses to grow. They didn't notice you studying them. They didn't notice how you let them brag, how you let them reveal their weaknesses in their own words. You weren't rushing to strike, you were collecting data. That patience unsettled them. They thought victory was speed. You knew it was timing. A dangerous mind does not rush. It waits for others to spend their energy, to reveal their cards, to expose themselves with noise. Then, when the perfect moment comes, it moves once and changes everything. They thought you were quiet because you were unsure. You were quiet because you were certain. You were waiting for the exact second where one move would end their entire performance. And when you finally made it, they realized the game had always belonged to you. You scare them because you don't compete where they expect you to. They train for the visible battle, the one with clear winners and losers, the one the crowd claps for. You trained for the invisible battle, the one fought in silence, the one no one even knows exists until it is over. That is why you look like you won without effort. They didn't see the hours you spent building the skills they dismissed. They didn't see the standards you enforced when no one was watching. They didn't see the sacrifices you made in private. And because they didn't see it, they can't explain it. People fear what they can't explain. They call you mysterious. They call you dangerous. They call you different. But what they're really saying is that they cannot read you, and unreadable is always the highest threat. They measure success in likes, applause, shallow validation. You measure success in control, in options, in the ability to walk away without losing anything. That is the unseen game. The power to walk away is stronger than the power to perform. Manipulators, liars, and fragile egos collapse when they meet someone who cannot be bribed by attention. You terrify them because they can't figure out what you want. And if they can't figure it out, they can't control you. They offer bait, and you don't bite. They offer applause, and you don't bow. They offer shortcuts, and you keep walking your path. The dangerous mind is immune to the currency of the weak. That immunity makes you a ghost in their system. They can't catch what doesn't play by their rules. There's a reason the most dangerous players rarely announce themselves. They let others write stories, build reputations, create noise. You let them tire themselves with the weight of performance. You let them build castles out of sand, smiling as the tide creeps in. They assume silence means absence. But silence is pressure. Silence is the quiet storm building under their feet. They do not feel it until it swallows them. You have learned this art. You do not need to interrupt. You let people trap themselves with their own words. You let them expose their weaknesses by trying too hard to look strong. The dangerous mind does not wrestle in mud. It simply waits for the rain to fall, knowing the ground will collapse on its own. They call you ruthless now, but the truth is you are efficient. You don't waste energy convincing anyone. You don't waste nights chasing their validation. You don't waste mornings replaying insults. You keep moving while they keep talking. That contrast feels cruel to them. They mistake your focus for brutality. But the truth is, you didn't destroy them. You simply refused to stop building while they wasted themselves. They can't forgive that. They can't forgive how you surpassed them without stepping into their arena. They can't forgive how you made them irrelevant by staying consistent. That is why they whisper. That is why they glare. They know they lost to someone who was playing a higher game the whole time. Every manipulator, every schemer, every shallow player depends on predictability. They need you to react the same way everyone else does. They need you to get flustered, to fight, to break into panic. But when you don't, the system malfunctions. The dangerous mind rewires its responses. You no longer run when threatened. You no longer beg when cornered. You no longer fight battles that don't matter. Instead, you let the storm come, and while they scream, you calculate. While they fight, you build. While they waste energy, you conserve. And then you release your move with the precision of a blade. They never see it coming because they assumed you were still playing their game. But you weren't. You were writing the rules all along. They never expected you to walk through their darkness without stumbling. They thought the shadow would cling to you, mark you, stain you. But you moved through it like smoke, leaving nothing behind, and that unsettled them. Shadows are used to trapping people, to swallowing the weak whole, to turning strong hearts heavy with fear. You did not collapse. You did not scream. You did not decorate their darkness with your pain. You passed through untouched, and that's why they fear you now. They saw that their weapons, silence, gossip, schemes, manipulation, slid right off you. To the shadow, the worst insult is irrelevance, and you made their entire game irrelevant by refusing to carry even a trace of it with you. They counted on scars. They wanted you to drag their cruelty like chains, to live repeating the story of what they did. That is the cycle shadows rely on. They don't just want to harm you in the moment. They want the echo to live in you forever, feeding them even after they've left. But you broke the cycle. You walked through without souvenirs. No bitterness to spread, no grudges to rehearse, no stories to keep them alive in your head. That clean exit is the most terrifying move you made, because it left them with nothing. Manipulators thrive on memory. You robbed them of it. You gave them no future, no continuation, no trace. You turned them into ghosts before they even realized they were fading. The shadow cannot stand a person who refuses to be defined by it. You became dangerous because you didn't let their darkness shape your identity. Others fell and made their pain their personality, but you refused. You saw the trap. You saw how they wanted you to wear the label forever, and you burned it. You refused to wear their fingerprints. That independence turned you into something untouchable. Because if their shadow doesn't define you, then what else can they use? They lost the leverage they thought was eternal. That's why they shake now when your name comes up. They know you walked through their world and left no trace, no evidence, no hold. And that freedom haunts them more than any revenge ever could. You terrify them because you are unmarked. To them, pain is supposed to brand you. Hurt is supposed to shape you into something smaller, something weaker. Yet you came out taller. You came out clearer. You came out without carrying the stench of their darkness. They wanted to be unforgettable, but you made them forgettable. You didn't give them the honor of being the defining event in your life. You became proof that their shadow had no teeth, no permanence, no legacy. And that proof burns them in silence. They thought they broke you, but all they did was reveal how breakable they truly were. That reversal is what keeps them up at night. The shadow never expected to fear the one who simply walked away. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need a show. You didn't need the world to see what they did. That is what sets you apart. The shadow survives when people shout about it, when its story spreads, when its image grows larger through retelling. You denied it that oxygen. You let silence carry it away. You did not play victim. You did not play avenger. You played survivor with elegance. And that elegance was sharper than any blade, because it told the world, without you saying a word, that nothing they threw at you was strong enough to leave residue. You moved on, and in doing so, you turned them into dust. Dust never frightens you. Dust disappears when the wind changes, and you became that wind. Every manipulator hopes for reaction. They crave it because reaction means evidence, and evidence means control. You gave them nothing. That nothing is what shredded their confidence. They expected to follow your footprints, to track your emotions, to keep you tangled in their web. But you left no prints. You left no thread. You moved through shadows like water through cracks, untouchable and unstoppable. They cannot explain it, and humans always fear what they cannot explain. They call you dangerous not because you attacked, but because you left without leaving fuel for them to burn. That's what power looks like. Not loud vengeance, not endless scars, but the refusal to let their darkness shape your story. The shadow always fears exposure, and your ability to walk through without a trace exposes it. You revealed its weakness. You showed that its power only works if you let it cling. Without your reaction, without your scars, without your retelling, it collapses. You demonstrated this in silence, and that silence is louder than their noise. They will never admit it, but in the quiet of their minds, they wonder how you did it. They wonder why you don't carry the weight others carried. They wonder how you erased them so easily. And that wonder cuts deeper than hate, because it forces them to admit they were never as strong as they believed. They wanted to haunt you. Instead, you haunt them with indifference. Understand this. Your strength is not measured by how loudly you fight shadows. It is measured by how little of you they get to keep. You mastered the art of leaving clean. And clean departures are rare. Most people take pieces of the shadow with them, replaying pain like a broken record. But you refused. You gave them no album to loop, no chorus to sing. You ended the music. That is why the silence belongs to you now. The silence is your kingdom, and in that kingdom they are powerless. They cannot reach you there. They cannot plant seeds there. You turned their own silence against them, and that inversion is something they will never overcome. They whisper your name now with unease, not because you destroyed them publicly, but because you erased them privately. You live free, you breathe easy, you stand taller, and that is their punishment. To watch you rise without carrying the burden they tried to chain you with. They hope to see you stumble for years under the weight of their shadow. Instead, you walk unmarked, untouched, unbroken. That sight terrifies them because it destroys the story they built in their heads, that they mattered enough to ruin you. They mattered for a moment, then you erased the moment. And nothing stings more than irrelevance after betrayal.